Every G7 leader has their work cut out, but none more than Joe Biden. He's physically in Hiroshima, but his mind must be in Washington. That's where the big debt ceiling talks are happening. Quick refresher, what exactly is the debt ceiling? There's a limit on how much the US government can borrow. That limit is called the debt ceiling. The US Congress sets this limit. Right now, the debt ceiling is $31.4 trillion. A lot of money, yes, but the US government has spent most of it. If the debt ceiling is not raised, they will run out of money, meaning no salary for government employees, no repayment of debt. In other words, a default. The US Treasury says time is running out, that Washington could default by the 1st of June. So Republicans and Democrats are hoping to strike a last-minute deal. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy sounded optimistic on Wednesday.
The only thing I'm more optimistic about, he finally agreed to something that every other time we've been able to solve a problem has worked. The structure of negotiations. I have the grit, the perseverance, and we're going to get it done.
The markets are hopeful too. US and European indices closed in the green on Thursday. But is a deal the end of it? Will things go back to normal overnight? Experts say they won't. We're talking about a major risk here. No one knows what a US default would even look like. Why? Because it's never ever happened before. So this is uncharted territory. Even if there's no default, there will be aftershocks. The question is, how big will it be? Wall Street says $1 trillion. Let me explain. The US Treasury is currently running out of money. It has around $95 billion in the bank. How much would it like to have? Around $550 billion by the end of June, $600 billion by the end of September. If the debt ceiling is raised, that can be achieved. But the process is dangerous. The Treasury will have to issue more bills than usual. It will have to raise a lot of money in quick time. And where will this cash come from? The private sector that buys the bills. The end result could be a major liquidity crisis. Let's try and understand with the help of an example. Imagine you and your friends are out for dinner. The restaurant's internet is out, so you'll have to pay by cash. Just one problem though. You use UPI and don't carry a lot of cash. So you go around the table and you ask your friends. Everyone empties their wallet. Thankfully, there's enough money to pay the bill. The flip side, no one has liquid cash anymore. Your friend circle has run out of cash, has run out of money. That's what could happen in the US. The Treasury's rapid attempts to raise money could drain liquidity. What happens then? Fundings and loans could get more expensive. Bank of America says the impact will be similar to a quarter-point interest hike. That's 25 basis points. In normal times, this may not have been a problem. But in 2023 America, this could be disastrous. Interest rates are already high. They're 5% higher than in March 2022. So the US economy does not need another shock. But from the looks of it, there is no escape. Deal or no deal, there will be trouble ahead. And just to be clear, this wasn't some unavoidable crisis. This was perfectly preventable. Most countries in the world have debt ceilings, but they're not absolute amounts. They are percentages of the GDP. Like in the European Union, it's 60% of the GDP. But in the US, it's an absolute amount. What is the rationale behind this? Apparently accountability, to make sure no US president goes on a spending spree. It's a great idea, but for this idea to work, you need rational, responsible leaders. Unfortunately, the US has none. You have liberal leaders who want to overspend. You have conservatives who want to underspend. No one wants the middle ground. As a result, the debt ceiling has become weaponized. No one seriously believes the US will default, but even the remote possibility is too dangerous. So what's the solution? Ideally, just remove it. Australia did exactly that. They imposed a debt ceiling after the financial crisis of 2008. They faced the same problem as the US. So what did they do? They created bipartisan support to remove the ceiling in 2013. Well, that requires political maturity, something that American leaders seem to lack. The fact is, a government default is not a political matter. It's like national security. It's like nuclear policy. There must be multi-partisan agreement on it. But knowing the US, I wouldn't count on it. Now let's shine some light on the world of political corruption. No, this is not a Pakistan story. It's about the US. The US House of Representatives is investigating President Joe Biden's family to see if he's involved in corruption. And they've made a startling revelation. Not about Biden, but his family. Apparently, they got millions of dollars from foreign entities, around $10 million according to the probe. When did this happen? When Joe Biden was the vice president of the US. Also, why is the US House investigating the president? Because it's controlled by the opposition. Here's a report.
US President Joe Biden's family is in the news again. It's not just Hunter Biden this time, but everyone from Biden's brother to his daughter-in-law. They're under investigation by the US House Oversight Committee. It's a group of lawmakers in the House of Representatives. It's now being headed by a Republican Party lawmaker. This is the Oversight Committee's chairman, James Comer, and he's come out with some shocking news. It turns out Biden's family members received around $10 million from foreign entities. This was while he was vice president under Barack Obama.
The bank records show the Biden family, their associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals and their companies.
We should pause here and explain. The Republican Party has been after Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, for a while now. They seem convinced that he's up to something illegal, and that Joe Biden has been helping cover up Hunter's wrongdoings. Remember the whole Hunter Biden laptop saga? That apparently his laptop contained evidence of Biden's corruption, especially regarding Ukraine? Well, 3 Republican-led investigation committees haven't been able to find proof of corruption for neither Joe nor Hunter Biden. But it hasn't stopped them from trying regularly. Like in this new case of Chinese firms paying Hunter Biden. The Republican lawmakers stressed on this.
Chinese nationals affiliated with the Bidens created limited liability companies in the United States, and then in a short period of time transferred their interest to a Chinese company that sent money to the Bidens. This is not normal. Hunter Biden and his associates courted business in countries that correlated directly with Joe Biden's work as vice president.
Comer said this is not normal. He didn't say that this was illegal. That's because technically, all of this is legal. But it does seem shady though. Biden's family members getting money from abroad, even from Chinese state-linked firms. But is there a legitimate reason? The Republicans don't think so. They don't have any proof that these foreign entities tried to influence Biden or that as vice president he did them any favors. But the belief is that it must have happened. Why else would they pay millions to Biden's family?
One thing everybody in this room and the American people definitely know is that the Biden family doesn't really have a business. There is no business structure around this family, except politics. And since Joe Biden has spent decades in the Senate, served 8 years as vice president, and is now president of the United States, and the family's getting money from various countries and foreign businesses through various shell companies and this web of LLCs. I mean, guys, you in the press, this is easy pickings. I'm giving you Pulitzer stuff here.
The Republicans don't really have the smoking gun yet. That's probably why they appealed to journalists in the room. Maybe they can succeed where the Republican Party has failed, because it seems they aren't going to rest until they nab the Biden family, Hunter in particular. And unexplained foreign funding really isn't helping the Biden family's case. Even if it is a witch hunt, perhaps it's better for Biden to go public with all the business dealings. If not, it will definitely be a Republican war cry in the 2024 presidential election.
50% and 15%. Similar sounding numbers, but they're obviously different. And for Spain, that has become a big problem. I'll explain. Their government held a survey. It was about unpaid work, routine activities like cooking, cleaning, childcare. Both men and women participated in this survey. About 50% women said they do most of the housework. What about men? 15%. It's a stark disparity, but it's not shocking. We'll tell you why, but first let's tell you what Spain is planning to do about it. They're trying to solve this old school problem with a modern day tool, an app. They're launching an app for household chores. You can divide housework among members of your family and monitor who is doing what. A lot like those expense sharing apps that we all use. Except here, men and women can log in the hours they spend doing housework. How will it help? The government says it will make the division equitable, because when you see a problem, it's hard to turn a blind eye. The idea seems interesting, but does Spain like it? The response has been mixed so far. Some people are angry and offended. The government says that's because they'll have to start doing their share of the work. Others have welcomed this app. And this is a big deal in Spain because unpaid work is a major issue there. It has led to legal battles. Divorce cases are being settled with huge bills. Men are being asked to pay for years of unpaid work to their ex-wives. In 2017, a man had to pay about $25,000 for the same. Earlier this year, a man was asked to pay some $220,000, that's more than 1.7 crore rupees, for unpaid housework. How do they arrive at these numbers? On the basis of minimum wage. Had these women been paid a minimum wage for the work they do at home, this is the money they would have earned. And Spain is taking this very seriously. We say kudos to them and are learning for the rest. Because the problem of unpaid work is not limited to this country. Around the world, men and women spend their time differently. Men spend more time working for money. Women work, but often do not get paid for it. And this is not a general assumption. It's backed by data. On average, women spend about 5 hours a day on unpaid housework, while men spend just an hour doing housework. Women also do 76% of all unpaid care work the world over, 76%. These numbers are a world average. Country-wise, they look very different. In some countries, men and women share the load more equitably, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Canada, and Finland. Here, too, women work more, but about 1 hour more than men on doing daily chores. Elsewhere, the picture looks grim, like in Japan, Mexico, Portugal, Turkey, and India. In all of these countries, women spend over 3 hours more than men on chores. In India, the number is 5 hours. That amounts to 1,825 hours in a year. Let me repeat that. In India, women do household work for over 1,800 hours, more than men, every year. That's a lot of time and effort spent on unpaid work. And the value of this work remains largely invisible to economists. It is not part of GDP calculations. It is not used to measure economic growth. It is also difficult to value. But today, let's try to put it in terms of money. In 2019, if women earned minimum wage for their unpaid work, they would have earned about $11 trillion the world over. $11 trillion, it's more money than the 50 biggest companies of the world made that year combined. So basically, it's a lot of money. Even in cases where both men and women have a day job, it's the women who do more housework. Even when women earn more money than their male partners, they do more housework. Among retirees, women do more housework. Among the non-employed, take a wild guess, women do more housework. I can literally turn this into a poem or a rap even, whatever you prefer. Because this is my only point. The quiet cost of unpaid work. And this is not just about lost money, it's also about high rates of burnout, stress, depression, anxiety, insomnia, and other such problems among women. And no, housework is not the only reason for those problems, but it adds to them. So what can you do? Well, share the load and spread the message at a personal level, at a policy level, like the chore distribution app in Spain, or China's legal right to seek compensation for unpaid work, or Sweden's parental leave policy, or Denmark's subsidized daycare policy. These are all good first steps. But governments can do a lot more to address the issue of unpaid work, to help us see this invisible work and assign it the value that it deserves. Think about it. If the UK's parliament were a rapper, it would probably say something like this: I've got 99 problems and my home's the latest one. Because the UK parliament just added a new problem to its long list of issues. It now has a structural problem. No, I'm not talking about bickering parliamentarians. I'm referring to the very structure of the parliament. It is the seat of British democracy, a UNESCO site, hailed as an architectural masterpiece, which has, quote-unquote, a real and rising risk of destruction. Because it is crumbling and leaking. It has a perpetual threat of fire, also a clear risk of history repeating itself. What am I talking about? Our next report tells you.
This is Britain's Parliament building, the Palace of Westminster, located in central London. Built in the 19th century, visited by 1 million people per year. A UNESCO site, often called an architectural marvel. Lots of random facts about this Gothic building, right? You must be wondering why we're giving you an information overload. We're simply trying to prep you for a dark twist. Because while this parliament was built to hold the UK together, now its own building is coming down. The UK parliament is crumbling, leaky, and at a constant risk of fire. With 44 fire incidents since 2016, its pipes are bursting and it's dropping masonry. Yes, chunks of the building are literally falling off. Electrical systems were last updated in the 1940s, and the building is riddled with asbestos, which is a building material. It was popular in the early 1800s, not so much anymore. Because it's hazardous to health. Inhaling it can cause lung diseases like cancer, and this asbestos is present in about 2,500 locations in the building. All of this and more has recently come to light in a hair-raising report released by the British House of Commons. And it says that a catastrophic event will destroy this building before long-delayed restoration work is done. By the sounds of it, this issue is pretty urgent, a burning issue to avoid a literal fire, if we may say so. Question is, will the UK pay heed to this report? Because, as you can tell, the damage is big, vast, and there's nothing new about it. There have been several warnings before, and there was also renewal work, but it's painfully slow. And it's mostly limited to patching up the place, which is done at about $2.5 million a week. Then there's also been a lot of back and forth. In 2018, lawmakers finally voted to move out of the building. They were going to do it by mid-2020 to make way for years' worth of repairs. But there is no certainty, because lawmakers don't want to move. Last year, a body was set up to oversee the repairs, but it was scrapped. So while the dithering continues, the building grows more decrepit. Some don't want to leave this historic building with its riverside terrace and subsidized restaurants. And some lawmakers are worried about the public's disapproval towards a multi-billion-dollar bill of repairs, especially when people in the UK are struggling to make ends meet. But if they continue to wait, what's about to come will be even more costly to the taxpayers, because history is not without warnings. This parliament's predecessor was destroyed in a fire in 1834. If that isn't enough, the Britons could learn from the 2019 fire in France's Notre Dame. So there are surely warnings, both in history and in lengthy reports published by parliament committees, out of which this week's report is the most urgent. Hopefully, the lawmakers will see it that way, and if they're still struggling, here's a helpful Friday night tip for them. If it's money the lawmakers are trying to save, wasting time and avoiding action is never value for money.
But try telling that to China. Beijing doesn't believe in multipolarity or division of powers. They want to be the top dog. Like all big powers before them, China is starting with the neighborhood. That's Central Asia. Xi Jinping is hosting a two-day summit. Leaders from all 5 Central Asian countries are attending. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. All 5 are former Soviet states. Hence, all of them have traditionally been closer to Russia. Central Asia is often called Russia's backyard, but China wants to change that. So Xi Jinping is throwing a grand party in Xi'an. And the choice of the venue is important, the city of Xi'an. Xi'an was the easternmost point of the ancient Silk Route. It's no secret that China wants to revive it. The Belt and Road Project, BRI, is often billed as the new Silk Route. Either way, the events in Xi'an were grand. You had dance performances, songs from Central Asia, light shows. It was less of a summit and more of a charm offensive. Perhaps that was the idea all along. To show Central Asia the difference between China and Russia. One is stuck in Ukraine, the other is throwing lavish parties. But charm cannot replace substance. So Xi Jinping whipped out the checkbook as well. He announced a development project worth $3.8 billion.
There is a proverb popular among farmers in Shaanxi province. If you work hard enough, gold will grow out of the land. In the same vein, a Central Asian saying goes, you get rewarded if you give, and you harvest if you sow. Let us work closely together to pursue common development, common affluence, and common prosperity, and embrace a brighter future for our 6 countries.
让我们携手并肩，团结奋斗。
So why is Xi Jinping trying to snatch Russia's allies? There are three major reasons. Number one, the location. Central Asia can be China's bridge to Europe. It's a key part of the Belt and Road project. Number two, the resources. Central Asia is home to vast oil and gas reserves, around 31 million barrels of oil and 825 trillion cubic feet of gas. These resources could end China's dependence on ship-borne oil. China may not control the seas, but they could control the land routes over Central Asia. And reason number three is security. Peace in Central Asia is key to peace in Xinjiang. China has jailed around 1 million Uyghurs in the province, but they fear an insurgency. And Xinjiang borders 3 Central Asian states. So trouble there could mean trouble in Xinjiang. Until now, Russia was in charge of Central Asian security, but Moscow is busy in Ukraine now. Thus, how long can China count on another country? So Xi Jinping wants to take charge. He wants to make inroads into Central Asia. The question is, will those countries play along? They certainly need the money. China's investments could help them expand their infrastructure. They also need security guarantees. 3 Central Asian countries are treaty allies of Russia: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Russia is bound to deploy troops there if the governments request. That's the treaty. It has already done so in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Will China be willing to do the same, or even offer that? The fact is, historic alliances are hard to break. China may end up making inroads into Central Asia, but replacing Russia is going to take time. And don't forget, Central Asia has other options. In the month of March, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited the region. So did European Union President Charles Michel last year. Everyone is courting Central Asia. Where does that leave Moscow? Putin knows he can't beat the Chinese checkbook. So what does he do? He widens the competition pool. It was Russia that proposed India's membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO. Now it wants Iran and Belarus to join. Do you see the strategy here? Russia is using other Asian powers to check China's influence. Nothing new, though. Every country does it, which is why Xi Jinping is betting on a direct approach. He says these Central Asian summits will be held every 2 years. The next one will be in 2025. Kazakhstan will be hosting it. If Putin and Xi are willing to share power in Central Asia, this wouldn't be a problem. But Putin doesn't seem like someone who shares. Let's not forget why he invaded Ukraine. So this summit may not signal a break in China-Russia ties, but it does expose the challenges. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Italy, where a 2-year-old toddler was rescued after being stranded in a flooded building. Tens of thousands of South Korean nurses went on strike after a law to improve their pay was vetoed. And Japanese activists held protests against the G7 Leaders' Summit in Hiroshima. Now, what makes the 19th of May significant? We're taking you back in history to the year 1571. On this day, in 1571, the city of Manila was established by a Spanish explorer named Miguel Lopez. Today, Manila is the capital of the Philippines. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday. exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.